No and yes. You don't learn to preach by reading a book about preaching. I mean, they're good to read, and I read books about preaching. But you don't learn to preach or grow as a preacher primarily through reading books about preaching or going to lots of preaching conferences, although they're worthwhile. It's like driving a car. You don't learn to drive a car by reading a book about cars and driving. You've got to get behind the wheel and drive the car. So you've got to do it. But yes, you have to read. Paul says a pastor is apt to preach. Apt to teach. We're teachers. We have, to some degree, a mastery of our subject, which is the Word of God and theology. So you need to be a teacher, a learner. So I read all the time. I have to read all the time. I want to know the Bible more deeply. I want to know God more deeply through His Word. I study theology. I study church history. Yes, you've got to read. In fact, I say to people, if you're not a reader, you can't be a preacher. You've got to make that discipline. You've got to know your world. But finally, you can't be, as a preacher, an intellectual hermit. You can't spend your days with books in the study. You've got to get out there with people. So reading isn't the be-all and end-all, but to be apt to teach, you've got to commit yourself to a life of disciplined reading.